I am April, a 40-year-old, part-time cashier. My husband, Chris, is 42 years old. We used to work for the same company in our 20s, and got married after a workplace romance. I quit my job after getting married, and we were blessed with 2 children, Mike, who is 7 years old, and John, 5-year-old. We lived modestly, focusing on leading a happy and fulfilling life. My younger sister, Carol, is 5 years younger than me and a workaholic. Even at the age of 35, she remains unmarried. As far as I know, she had only a few relationships since her student days, and for the past few years, there hasn't been any sign of a romantic partner. Why don't you consider getting married at least once as a life experience? I jokingly said that a few times, but Carol would always respond with a laugh. Getting married for the sake of experience would be disrespectful to my potential partner. Besides, I have my lovely nephew and niece to dote on. That's more than enough. She would say that while laughing, and she would shower my children with affection, spoiling them. My sister, unfortunately, passed away in a sudden traffic accident. She was the type of person who faithfully followed even the smallest traffic rules because she believed they were there to protect others. On that day, she waited for the signal to turn green before crossing the sparsely trafficked road. However, she was hit by a drunk driver who thought they could get away with it. She died almost instantly. The day before I received the news of the accident, we spoke on the phone just like any other day. I never imagined that the next day, she would be gone from my life so suddenly. It's a reality I have to accept. I have to raise the 2 children she loved and cared for. Even though I understood it in my mind, my heart couldn't catch up. There were some mistakes on my part, and I knew that my husband, who had been supportive at first, was starting to become a little frustrated. Are you okay with this? Should we leave the kids with my family? I believe my husband was trying to be kind in his own way. But if the children were taken away from me now, I would lose my reason to live. I'm sorry. I'm fine. Please don't take the children away from me. Take them away? I never intended to do that. I felt like I had hurt my husband, but I didn't have the capacity to consider his feelings at the moment. Only the heavy atmosphere remained in the room. The next day, I received a letter from a law firm. At first, I was filled with doubts like, a lawyer? What could this be about? Could it be that the driver responsible for the accident was demanding a settlement? I couldn't think of anything good that could come out of it. However, even if I didn't have any personal involvement, I didn't want to ignore it and face dire consequences later. I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. The contents of the letter were about my sister's assets. She had started her own business while she was still a university student, and at the time, she gained attention as a female entrepreneur and even appeared on television. That exposure led to increased recognition, and after graduation, she expanded her businesses in various fields. She had become a successful businesswoman, managing several companies. I had heard that she had a substantial income and considerable savings, but I never thought much about it since she had no intention of getting married. However, I now recalled that she had mentioned something about leaving an inheritance for me, her sister, and my children in case anything happened to her, considering she had no plans to marry. I had taken it as a half-hearted joke at the time, because I never imagined that my younger sister would pass away before me. Setting aside my own share, I made a vow to honor my sister's wishes and ensure that the portion designated for my children would be executed exactly as she had intended. I initially thought that the inheritance amount wouldn't be that substantial. However, as I continued reading, I couldn't believe my eyes. The total inheritance amount was $5 million. Could it be a mistake? I double-checked multiple times, but the figure clearly stated $5 million. It was an astronomical sum, far beyond what an average person would inherit. It was not the kind of amount that could be kept a secret from my husband clandestinely. I thought it would be best to inform him, so I casually mentioned it to him. However, given that the actual amount seemed unrealistically high, I decided to round it down to $1 million. After all, $1 million is a figure often heard in relation to lottery winnings. Little did I expect that the news would somehow leak to the outside world. Chris, I haven't heard from you recently. Are you doing well? My husband and my in-laws have a very close relationship. Even though we are married and living separately, they regularly exchange updates with each other. Well, my husband being the eldest son, probably adds to their closeness. They sometimes send local seasonal items as gifts. Given this kind of relationship, I didn't think my husband, who had been helping me with household chores and childcare while I was feeling down due to my sister's sudden death, would have the luxury to contact his family. However, my worried mother-in-law reached out to me through a video call. Well, April's sister had an accident and passed away. Oh my, why didn't you let me know? Her sister was running multiple companies as a CEO. We held a funeral mainly for business associates. April's parents are no longer alive, and I believe there weren't any other relatives. She said during the wedding introduction that you two only have as family. April's sister was a well-known person who appeared on TV for a while, right? She hasn't been on TV recently, but still, as a CEO running multiple companies, she must have had a substantial inheritance. Yeah, it seems like she inherited something. Chris had no ill intentions. It was merely his usual way of updating his family. However, I chose to inform him. Because we are a family living together, and I intended to stay by his side. Although we lived separately from my in-laws, and Chris said there was no need to worry about being the eldest son's wife, or anything related to the family line, I couldn't fully trust them, or feel comfortable sharing everything with them, despite not disliking them. A few days later, my in-laws came to our house. I wanted to see my son and grandchild's faces for a change. However, they should have been seeing each other's faces frequently, through video calls. After exchanging formal greetings with their grandchild, they quickly opened a travel brochure, and spoke loud enough for me to hear. Honey, you haven't been on a trip lately. When was the last time? I think it was when our first grandchild was born, and we went to Eyes for the shrine visit. Oh, so it's been about 7 years since we last went? I could hear their conversation clearly as I worked in the kitchen, and I noticed my husband glancing at me from time to time. April, why don't you come over here and join the conversation? Impatient with my hesitation to join them, he urged me to participate in the travel discussion. Reluctantly, I brought tea and sat down with them. By the way, wasn't our 45th wedding anniversary coming up next year? Oh, 45 years, that's impressive. They emphasized that it wasn't just a trip they wanted, but it was also meant to be a celebration of their anniversary. True, they had taken care of our children for a few days in the past. And during the birth of our second child, they stayed here for an extended period, taking care of the children and Chris. I felt a sense of indebtedness for their support in taking care of the elderly, and I decided to give them a trip as a present, including their anniversary celebration. However, instead of using the inheritance from my sister, I planned to use the savings from my single days, and the savings I had accumulated from part-time work, which I had set aside for emergencies. In a way, this situation could be considered an emergency. Satisfied with this decision, my in-laws stayed overnight and returned to their home. After returning from their trip, my in-laws expressed their gratitude and praised me. Thank you, April. We had a wonderful time. Chris really married a great wife. However, their words didn't feel like genuine expressions of joy and gratitude. Furthermore, my husband added, if there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask. Money is not a concern. His tone made it sound as if he had inherited the entire fortune. Chris, the way you're talking makes it seem like you inherited a substantial amount. She started imagining things on her own and then asked me in a soft, coaxing voice, April, I've been wanting to try ordering some specialty products. What do you think? While staying at home, we can enjoy local specialties and luxury items from various places. However, it can be quite costly, so for our family of 4, it's not something we can easily afford. It must be my age. I realized during our recent trip that I get tired easily. They say we can taste local specialties at home. In other words, he was implying that due to his age, he couldn't travel freely anymore, and would rather indulge in luxurious experiences at home. It's almost Father's birthday. I couldn't refuse celebrating his birthday when he mentioned it. He expressed his desire to try a meal that cost over $100 per person, so I ordered 2 portions. However, when my husband complained about not having their own portion, I ended up ordering an additional 4 portions. If maintaining a good relationship with my in-laws requires such expenses, I decided to think of it as the cost of maintaining that relationship. However, now it was my mother's birthday, and my in-laws started interfering, using the excuse of celebrating the children's events as a pretext to demand expensive things. They even mentioned that they were considering making their house barrier-free for fear of accidents due to their age and asked if we could bear the burden. They also wanted to prepare for natural disasters and requested us to cover the initial cost of several tens of dollars for self-power generation, and so on. While it's true that being prepared is important, the house my in-laws lived in was quite old and deteriorating. with a considerable number of years since it was built. Moreover, my husband didn't plan to live there himself, as he had mentioned that if they couldn't manage on their own, they would sell the land and move into a facility with the money from the sale. So, why suddenly the need for barrier-free modifications? Why the preparation for self-power generation against natural disasters? It became apparent to me that they were clearly seeking money from me, trying to extort me with seemingly plausible excuses. However, my husband, being the carefree person he was, said, "Just listen to what they have to say, at least. Apparently, the contractors are coming for a preliminary inspection. If you have any concerns, you can come along and hear it for yourself." So, I went to my in-laws' house to attend the meeting. I couldn't remember the last time I visited their house. Was it always this dilapidated? While it had its old-fashioned charm before, it wasn't this bad. Even the contractor suggested that, if they wanted to make it barrier-free, it would be better to rebuild the entire house. It turned out that my in-laws were waiting for those words from the contractor. My father-in-law casually said to me with a poker face, "That's the situation, April. Can you please help us keep the costs down?" Hell no. If I had money to build a new house, I should use it to rebuild our own home. The words almost slipped out of my mouth, but I held them back. Just then, a mail delivery person arrived and handed me several envelopes addressed to my in-laws. The senders were clearly loan companies, and some even looked like shady lenders. My in-laws already seemed to believe that the plan for rebuilding was set, as they hurriedly went inside with light footsteps. I quickly followed, and as I entered the house, a phone in the entrance started ringing. My in-laws were engrossed in their conversation with the contractor and didn't intend to answer the call. Helpless, I answered the phone, and a deep, bellowing voice filled the line. It was a scary and intimidating voice. The man yelled, demanding the money be repaid, warning them to meet the payment deadlines, and threatening that he would find them no matter where they tried to hide. After a series of menacing statements, the call abruptly ended from the other side. The fact that they received a phone call for payment reminders makes me wonder how much they have been in arrears. Does my husband know about this? I'm confident that he has no idea, given his carefree nature. He might either think that it's limited to his parents, or even suggest that I should help them out. The current phone call is definitely related to something shady, beyond just a regular loan. It's clear that I can't handle this on my own with just my husband. After careful consideration, I decided to seek the assistance of a private investigator to look into my in-laws' financial transactions. Unless it's an actual legal case, it's difficult to obtain detailed information about someone's financial transactions. However, based on my in-laws' spending habits and actions, I could at least estimate the extent of their expenses and debts. I even learned that they were planning to pass on the overdue payments to me in the near future. I refused to use the money I inherited from my sister to repay my in-laws' indulgent and wasteful spending. So, while pondering how to overcome this situation, surprisingly, Chris and in-laws took action before I could. I had thought that my carefree husband had no knowledge about his parents' debts. However, to my surprise, he had actually known about it for quite some time. "April, this is my lifelong request. Please help my parents." He places a paper bag in front of me, and as I open it, numerous collection notices spill out. Most of them are unopened. The contents of the letters are all similar, so I already know what they say without even opening them. And they arrive every day, several of them. Lately, they've been coming to the house and pounding on the door from early morning. They even put up strange posters. If we fulfill their demands, they might stop. That's why we're asking you, April. You must have inherited a lot, right? If so, paying off this small debt in one lump sum should be easy. If it's such a small amount, wouldn't it be better if you repaid it yourselves? You just have to give the amount I tell you. That's all. They must be in a desperate situation. My husband, who rarely raises his voice, is now shouting so loudly that the whole neighborhood can hear him. Both your husband and parents are begging you, so why are you behaving like this? You've become arrogant as soon as you received the money. You have 100 million, don't you? It's embarrassing how stingy you are. No, I can't do that. My sister passed away before realizing her dreams. I want to fulfill her wishes. That's why I won't use a single penny from her inheritance to repay your debts. What a heartless daughter-in-law. Absolutely. The words that come out of my in-laws' mouths are a series of insults directed at me. However, I have no intention of backing down. I've decided to use every bit of the money my sister left me for the future of my children. If it's her wish, I must fulfill it, no matter what. This money-grubbing wife of ours. She's not just stingy, she's worse than that. How dare she have the audacity to call herself a member of our family all this time, tarnishing our reputation. Oh please, the money-grubbing one is you. The tarnishing comes from your reckless spending habits and your disregard for the world. Your actions have brought about these consequences. It's surprising to see Chris, who used to support his parents, now joining in your abusive behavior. Come to think of it, April's sister, Carol, used to care for Mike so much. I suppose she wanted the inheritance to be used for that purpose. He still had the awareness of being a father, even in his decayed state. Upon learning about his sister-in-law's intentions, Chris chose not to join his parents in berating me any further. A few days later, while my husband was keeping my in-laws occupied at their house, I took action with the help of a lawyer to fulfill my sister's wishes. She had detailed instructions in her will about how the inheritance should be used. Since I didn't fully understand legal matters, I left everything in the hands of the lawyer. The lawyer repeatedly confirmed whether the amount allocated for the children would be sufficient for their needs. In addition to the substantial amount of $5 million, my sister had provided specific instructions. For instance, she mentioned funds for the children's future wedding expenses, any potential costs for fertility treatments, and medical expenses in case of a serious illness. It was evident that she cared deeply for the well-being of my children. Furthermore, she expressed her desire to donate any remaining funds to a charitable organization. However, she hadn't specified which organization. So, after consulting with the lawyer, we decided to donate to organizations that benefit children and women. After completing all the necessary arrangements, my husband returned home and handed me a piece of paper. My part is written there. You just need to write your part and submit it to the registry office as soon as possible. It was a divorce form. While my husband had been keeping my in-laws occupied at their house, we had already received several reports from the neighbors. Debt collectors had been coming relentlessly at all hours. Sensing the danger, my in-laws hastily left with only the bare essentials. Chris also intends to stay hidden in a remote area, away from here, to avoid the possibility of his parents discovering his whereabouts. Someday, they might discover the details of my inheritance and come barging in. I desperately wanted to protect myself and my children, but apart from divorce, I couldn't think of any other way. I slumped weakly, feeling helpless. My husband isn't a bad person. He can be naive and oblivious to the ways of the world, but he hadn't joined in his parents' mistreatment and exploitation. If only he had supported me and the children even a little. As soon as I was told that I just needed to pay money and everything would be fine, the illusion of our 100-year love completely shattered for me. In front of my husband, I filled out the divorce form with my own name and immediately submitted it to the registry office. Since that day, I haven't seen my husband, nor have I received any contact from my in-laws. Immediately after the divorce, I left that place and moved to the land where my sister and I had spent our childhood. Only once, through a forwarded message, did I hear from my ex-husband. Apparently, their whereabouts were eventually discovered by the debt collectors, and both he and his parents were forced into hard labor to repay the debts. The letter ended with words expressing concern for the safety of our children. Today, I continue to live earnestly, striving to fulfill my sister's wishes.